When a man heard faint cries coming from a trash bin, he never imagined what he was about to find. Inside a torn grocery bag lay the tiniest puppy anyone had ever seen, smaller than his palm, barely breathing, its heartbeat weaker than a whisper. No one had ever seen anything like it. He rushed it to the vet, desperate to save it. But what happened next left even the doctor speechless. The vet froze, and tears filled his eyes when he realized why this puppy was so small. What they discovered would change everything, because behind that fragile heartbeat lay a secret so heartbreaking. Even science couldn't explain it. Stay till the end, but you won't forget this story. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The night was quiet, save for the distant hum of passing cars and the whisper of wind weaving through narrow alleys. Under the pale glow of a flickering streetlight, a man named Ethan trudged home, his coat pulled tight against the cold. The world seemed asleep, until a faint, broken sound pierced the silence. It wasn't a cat, nor the squeak of rats rummaging through trash. It was softer, sadder. A trembling, desperate whimper. Ethan stopped, frowning. He tilted his head, listening. There it was again, a tiny, pleading cry coming from behind a row of dumpsters. His heart skipped. He stepped closer, boots crunching on the damp ground. The smell of rotten food hung thick in the air, but that sound, it didn't stop. He crouched and moved aside a torn garbage bag. The noise grew louder. His flashlight beam swept through the dark, landing on something that made his breath catch. Inside a crumpled grocery bag lay the smallest creature he had ever seen. A puppy no bigger than his thumb, trembling, its fur wet and matted. Ethan froze. The puppy's eyes were barely open, its chest rising with weak, shallow breaths. For a second he thought it was already gone, but then it moved, letting out a faint squeak as if begging him not to leave. Without hesitation, Ethan gently scooped the fragile life into his hands, his fingers trembling. The warmth of his palm seemed to calm the tiny creature. Hey, it's okay," he whispered, his voice cracking. The puppy blinked once, and for a heartbeat its tiny paw clung weakly to his finger, as if saying thank you for finding me. That was the moment Ethan knew. This night was about to change everything. Ethan stood frozen under the dim streetlight, his breath visible in the cold air. The puppy's tiny body was trembling violently, its squeaks so faint that he had to lean close just to hear them. He'd seen stray dogs before, sick, abandoned, hungry, but nothing like this. This little creature was impossibly small, like nature itself had made a mistake. Its fur was soft gray, its eyes barely open, and its heartbeat fluttered beneath his fingers like a dying butterfly. He wrapped the puppy gently in his scarf, trying to shield it from the cold. The tiny thing fit easily into his cupped palms, barely heavier than a feather. Ethan's heart twisted. How long had it been lying there crying for help while the world passed by? He could see now that its ribs showed through the thin fur. Its paws were smaller than coins, and its whimpers were getting weaker. "Hang on, little one," Ethan murmured, tucking it close to his chest. His scarf dampened with the puppy's tears. Or maybe they were his own. He didn't care. All he knew was that if he didn't act now, it wouldn't survive another hour. He looked around, hoping someone else would appear, but the alley was empty. Just him, the cold, and this fragile life fighting to stay awake. Somewhere deep inside, something stirred. A memory of his childhood dog, Max, who had died in his arms years ago. That same helpless feeling came rushing back. Not again, not this time. With one last glance at the abandoned alley, Ethan turned and ran. His footsteps echoed through the night as he whispered to the tiny bundle in his hands. "You're going to be okay, I promise." He didn't know it yet. But this smallest of creatures was about to change everything. Not just for him, but for everyone who would soon hear its incredible story. Ethan's heart pounded as he raced through the quiet streets, the tiny bundle pressed against his chest. Every second felt like a lifetime. The puppy's weak cries had grown fainter, its little body trembling less, and that terrified him even more. He couldn't lose it. Not after finding it. Not after feeling that tiny heartbeat in his hand. The night air bit into his lungs as he ran past shuttered stores and flickering streetlights. His phone's GPS glowed in his palm, showing the nearest animal clinic 2.3 miles away. Too far, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. "Hold on, little one," he whispered between gasps, glancing down at the scarf in his arms. Please, just hold on. By the time he reached the small 24-hour veterinary clinic, his legs burned and his throat felt raw. He burst through the glass doors, startling the night receptionist. Please, help, he shouted, voice cracking. It's dying. The woman's eyes widened as she saw the bundle in his hands. Doctor, emergency, she called out. Within seconds, a tired-looking vet in scrubs rushed from the back room, wiping his hands. But the moment his eyes landed on the puppy, everything else stopped. What is this? The vet whispered, taking the tiny creature gently. His expression changed from confusion to shock. It's so small. This can't be real. Ethan's chest tightened. Can you save it? He pleaded. The vet didn't answer. He simply moved with urgency, laying the puppy under a heat lamp, inserting a minuscule oxygen tube and whispering commands to the nurse. Heartbeats unstable. Get me a microfeeding syringe, now. Ethan watched helplessly, palms shaking. The room was filled with soft beeps, murmured medical terms, and the faint sound of life fighting to survive. And then, for a moment, the puppy stopped moving. Come on. Breathe, the vet muttered, his hands trembling. Don't give up on me now. The room fell silent. Then a tiny, fragile squeak broke through the air. It was still alive. Dr. Harris had been a veterinarian for nearly 20 years, but nothing in his career had ever prepared him for this. The moment he laid the tiny puppy on the heated table, his breath caught. It wasn't just small, it was impossibly small. Barely the size of a newborn hamster, its heartbeat fluttered beneath translucent skin, and its ribs rose and fell with fragile rhythm. He leaned closer, adjusting his glasses. This can't be right, he murmured under his breath. The nurse beside him froze, unsure how to help. Doctor? She asked softly. Dr. Harris shook his head slowly. This puppy, it's not even supposed to survive outside the womb yet. He turned to Ethan, disbelief in his eyes. Where did you find it? In a trash bag, Ethan replied, his voice still trembling. It was crying. I couldn't just leave it there. The vet's lips pressed into a thin line. You did the right thing bringing it here. His tone softened, though his mind raced. He'd seen premature puppies before, but never one like this. The body proportions were off, the bones too delicate, the heartbeat irregular, but steady. Get me the micro-incubator, he ordered quietly. As the nurse moved swiftly, Dr. Harris slipped a fingertip under the puppy's chin. The little creature responded. Its mouth opened in a weak yawn, followed by a faint squeak that echoed through the sterile room. That sound, tiny but determined, sent chills down his spine. This one wants to live, he whispered. Ethan leaned closer, his voice barely audible. Can it? Dr. Harris hesitated. If we're lucky, maybe. But I've never seen a puppy this small survive longer than a few hours. He watched as the nurse placed the fragile animal into the incubator, its minuscule paws twitching. Then something unexpected happened. The puppy turned its head, pressing its nose weakly against the glass as if searching for something. Or someone. Dr. Harris felt a lump form in his throat. You're a fighter, aren't you? He said softly. Ethan looked on, hope flickering in his eyes. Neither of them knew that this tiny life, clinging to existence, was about to reveal a secret that would shake them both to their core. The small clinic room had gone silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Ethan stood motionless beside the incubator, his eyes glued to the fragile life within. The puppy lay curled up beneath the warm light, its fur barely moving with each shallow breath. Dr. Harris checked the vitals again, his brows knitted in concentration. Temperature's stabilizing, he murmured, but the heart rate still dangerously weak. Ethan's throat tightened. Isn't there anything else we can do? The vet sighed softly, rubbing the back of his neck. We're already doing everything possible. Warmth, oxygen, glucose. The rest, he looked at the puppy, voice dropping to a whisper, is up to him. Ethan leaned closer to the incubator's glass, his breath fogging it slightly. The tiny creature looked impossibly delicate, a trembling spark of life fighting against the darkness. He pressed his palm gently to the side of the glass as if offering strength. You're not alone, he said quietly. I'm right here. Hours passed. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second stretching like eternity. The nurse brought coffee neither of them touched. The room felt like a battlefront. The vet on one side, death on the other. Every few minutes, the puppy's tiny chest would stutter, and both men would hold their breath, waiting. Then miraculously, it would rise again. Dr. Harris couldn't explain it. The resilience, the will to live. "This pup has more fight in him than most adults I've treated," he said under his breath. At dawn, the first light of morning slipped through the blinds, bathing the incubator in a golden glow. The puppy stirred, letting out a soft, fragile cry. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. Dr. Harris smiled faintly, exhaustion written all over his face. "He's still here," the vet whispered. "He's still fighting." And for the first time that night, hope began to breathe again. Morning light filtered through the blinds as Dr. Harris studied the puppy's scans on his monitor. Ethan sat nearby, sipping cold coffee, his eyes red from exhaustion. The puppy, now resting in the incubator, looked peaceful, almost normal, but something about it didn't make sense. Dr. Harris zoomed in on the x-rays again, his brows furrowing. "This is impossible," he muttered. The bone density was irregular, the organs compressed, yet everything was functioning. It's like nature tried to shrink a full-sized dog into something that shouldn't exist. Ethan leaned forward, anxious. "What do you mean?" The vet exhaled. "Look at this, the heart's fully developed, the lungs too. But the body, it's proportionally too small. This isn't a premature puppy, it's something else." He turned toward Ethan, his tone softening. "I've read about rare cases, microdwarfism in animals. But even then, they're twice this size. I've never seen anything like this." Ethan glanced at the incubator, his voice trembling. "So, is he suffering?" Dr. Harris shook his head slowly. "Surprisingly, no. His organs are weak but functioning. It's as if his body refuses to give up." He paused, his eyes softening. "It's almost like he's fighting against how he was made." The words sank deep into the room. Ethan swallowed hard. "Then we keep fighting too." A faint sound broke the silence and a tiny whimper from the incubator. Both men turned. The puppy was moving again, pressing its paw weakly against the glass, its eyes fluttering open for the first time. Dr. Harris's voice caught. "He's responding to your voice." Ethan leaned closer, whispering, "Hey, little guy." "I'm here." The puppy blinked, its breathing steadying ever so slightly. The monitor beeped stronger. Dr. Harris stared in awe. Whatever he is, he wants to live. Neither of them realized that this strange condition wasn't just a medical mystery. It was the key to uncovering the heartbreaking truth of where the puppy had come from. The sun had fully risen when Dr. Harris finally looked up from his desk. Papers were scattered everywhere. Test results, genetic charts, and notes scribbled in the margins. He'd been running scans for hours, trying to make sense of the impossible readings. Ethan, half asleep in a chair nearby, stirred when the vet finally spoke. "There's something off about this," Dr. Harris said quietly. "This puppy didn't just happen by chance." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" The vet turned the monitor toward him. "See this?" He pointed to the DNA comparison graph. "There are irregular markers, genetic splices that don't occur naturally. This pup wasn't born small. It was made this way." Ethan's eyes widened. "Made? You mean someone did this on purpose?" Dr. Harris nodded grimly. "It looks like selective inbreeding, maybe even gene manipulation. Whoever bred him pushed too far, trying to create the smallest dog possible and nearly killed him in the process." Ethan sat up straight, his shock turning to anger. "So someone bred him just to sell him as some kind of miniature novelty?" "Exactly," Dr. Harris said. "There's been a rise in illegal backyard breeders, people chasing trends online. They'll force litters from weak or underdeveloped dogs, and when something goes wrong," his voice trailed off, "they throw away the ones that don't sell." Ethan's stomach turned. He looked at the incubator, where the puppy stirred faintly. "So that's why he was in the trash," he whispered. "They dumped him like garbage." The vet's hands tightened into fists. "This isn't just cruelty. It's criminal." He turned to Ethan. "If that puppy survived, there could be others, and then they might not be as lucky." Ethan met his gaze, determination replacing exhaustion. "Then we find them," he said firmly. "No one else should suffer like he did." Dr. Harris nodded slowly. "I'll call animal control and report it. But be prepared. If we dig into this, we might uncover something much worse than we expect." Ethan glanced once more at the incubator, his voice low but steady. "Then it's a risk worth taking." The day wore on, but Ethan couldn't bring himself to leave the clinic. He sat by the incubator, watching the fragile puppy sleep beneath the warm glow of the lamp. Every slow, steady breath felt like a miracle. Dr. Harris had insisted he rest, but Ethan couldn't look away. There was something about the way the tiny creature fought for life, as if it knew it was being given a second chance. At one point, the puppy stirred. Its eyes, still clouded with newborn haze, blinked open for the first time. Ethan leaned in, heart pounding. Those tiny eyes, barely focused, found him. For a long moment, neither moved. It was as if the world had gone silent, leaving only that small heartbeat and the quiet connection between them. "Hey, little fighter," Ethan whispered, smiling faintly. "You made it through another day." The puppy let out a soft, almost content sigh, curling its paw against the glass. That single motion undid Ethan completely. He'd seen strength before, in people, in animals, but nothing like this. This wasn't just survival. It was trust. Dr. Harris approached quietly, a faint smile tugging at his tired face. "He responds to your voice," he said. "You've become his anchor." Ethan looked up, emotion glistening in his eyes. "Then I'll keep talking," he said softly. "As long as he keeps breathing, I'll be here." That night, Ethan stayed at the clinic. The vet dimmed the lights and the only glow came from the incubator. Ethan whispered softly, telling the puppy stories. About the stars, about his childhood dog, about hope. And though the puppy couldn't understand the words, something in the room changed. The monitor beeped stronger, the breathing steadied. It was as if the tiny heart had decided it wasn't done fighting. Not while someone was finally fighting for it. Long after midnight, the clinic had gone quiet. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, casting pale shadows across the room. Dr. Harris sat alone at his desk, a mug of untouched coffee growing cold beside a stack of test results. Ethan had finally fallen asleep in the waiting chair, his hand still resting near the incubator's glass. But the vet's mind wouldn't rest. Something about the puppy's vitals didn't add up. He turned back to the monitor and magnified the X-ray images again. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered under his breath. The puppy's bones were fragile, yes, but perfectly aligned. Its organs, though undersized, were functioning in perfect harmony. That shouldn't have been possible. In any normal case, a puppy this small would never survive even an hour. Dr. Harris leaned closer to the screen, tracing the faint outline of the puppy's chest. And that's when he saw it, a flicker, a tiny pulse that seemed offbeat. He replayed the ultrasound footage. The heartbeat wasn't just irregular, it was double-layered, almost echoing itself. "What on earth?" he whispered. He zoomed in again. 2 chambers, one tiny, one abnormally enlarged, working together like 2 hearts in one body. He'd never seen anything like it. Suddenly, a small noise pulled his attention. The puppy whimpered faintly from the incubator, its paws twitching as if reacting to his discovery. Dr. Harris walked over, his expression softening. "You're full of surprises, aren't you?" he murmured. He checked the monitor one more time, then smiled faintly. "You shouldn't be alive, little one," he said, voice barely a whisper. "But maybe you're proof that life finds a way." As he dimmed the lights and looked toward the sleeping Ethan, the vet felt something stir inside him, a quiet awe he hadn't felt in years. This wasn't just medicine anymore. It was a miracle unfolding before his eyes. And deep down, Dr. Harris knew, whatever this puppy was, it was about to change his life forever. The clinic was still and quiet when it happened. The faint hum of machines was the only sound, until a soft, trembling cry broke through the silence. Dr. Harris looked up instantly. The puppy, who had been sleeping peacefully in the incubator, was now stirring restlessly. Its tiny body quivered, its paws twitching against the glass. Ethan stirred from his chair, rubbing his eyes. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Dr. Harris moved closer, his expression tense. "I'm not sure." He opened the incubator carefully, lifting the puppy into his hands. The tiny creature let out another sound, longer this time, filled with distress. It wasn't the weak whimper of pain. It was different. It was calling out. The vet's brows furrowed. "It's not hurting," he whispered. "It's searching." Ethan stepped closer, heart aching as the puppy's squeaks grew louder. The tiny head turned from side to side, nose twitching as though it were trying to find something familiar. And then for the briefest moment the sound that came out wasn't just a cry, it was a longing wail, fragile yet full of emotion. Dr. Harris felt a lump rise in his throat. "He's calling for his mother," he murmured, realization dawning. Even after everything, he still remembers her scent. The puppy nestled weakly into his palm, breathing heavily, as if begging for comfort that wasn't there. Ethan's eyes filled with tears. "He doesn't know she's gone," he whispered. Dr. Harris gently placed the puppy back into the incubator, his voice breaking slightly. "Or maybe he refuses to believe she is." That night, neither man spoke again. The puppy's cry had said everything, a sound of love, loss, and a bond that even near death couldn't erase. The next morning, Ethan stood at the clinic's entrance, sunlight spilling across the tiled floor. He hadn't slept all night. The puppy's cries still echoed in his mind, that desperate, heartbreaking call for a mother who might never return. But Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere out there, the mother was alive, waiting. Dr. Harris joined him, clutching a folder of reports. "If that puppy came from an illegal breeder," he said grimly, "there's a chance the others are still being kept nearby. Maybe even the mother." Ethan nodded. "Then we find her." The vet hesitated. "Ethan, this isn't exactly safe." "These people—" "I don't care," Ethan interrupted. "That little one's still crying for her. I can't sit here knowing she might be out there." Dr. Harris sighed, but he saw the determination in Ethan's eyes, the same fire that had kept the puppy alive. Finally, he grabbed his coat. "All right, let's go." They drove back to the place where Ethan had found the grocery bag, the narrow alley behind the row of abandoned houses. The smell of rot and damp cardboard lingered in the air. Ethan's stomach twisted as he recognized the dumpster where it all began. They searched the surrounding area, calling softly, listening for any sound of life. At first there was nothing but wind. Then faintly, a weak whine drifted from behind a collapsed shed. Ethan froze. "Did you hear that?" Both men rushed forward, moving debris aside. Under a pile of broken wood and torn blankets lay a thin, trembling shape, a female dog, barely breathing, her ribs showing through her fur. Dr. Harris dropped to his knees, checking her pulse. "She's alive," he said, eyes wide. "Barely, but she's alive." Ethan swallowed hard, voice cracking. "It's her. It has to be." The mother's dull eyes fluttered open and she gave a faint, broken whimper. The same sound her tiny pup had made in the clinic the night before. And in that moment, Ethan knew they hadn't just saved one life. They'd found a family. The drive back to the clinic felt endless. Ethan sat in the back seat with the injured mother dog cradled in his arms, her head resting weakly against his lap. Her breathing was shallow, every inhale a struggle. Dr. Harris drove fast, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. "Stay with us," he muttered. "Just a little longer." The mother's fur was coarse and filthy, patches missing from malnutrition. Scars marked her sides, signs of the cruel life she'd endured. Yet even in her fragile state, her nose twitched as if she sensed something familiar waiting ahead. Ethan looked down at her and whispered, "Your baby's alive. He's waiting for you." At those words, her eyes fluttered open, soft and brown, glistening with exhaustion but also recognition. She let out a faint whimper, her tail giving the smallest twitch. It was enough to make Ethan's throat tighten. When they burst into the clinic, the nurse gasped. "Is that?" Dr. Harris didn't stop moving. "Clear the table," he barked. "She's crashing." They worked quickly, IV fluids, oxygen, warmth, everything they could do to stabilize her. Ethan hovered close, his hands trembling, whispering encouragement. Minutes passed in agonizing silence. Then the monitor steadied, slow but steady. Dr. Harris exhaled deeply, his shoulders dropping. "She's a fighter too," he said quietly. Ethan smiled through tears. "Just like her pup." Dr. Harris hesitated, then nodded toward the incubator in the next room. "Bring him here, carefully." Ethan lifted the tiny bundle and carried him over. The moment the puppy's scent reached the air, the mother stirred. Her head turned weakly and a soft broken sound escaped her throat, half whine, half cry. The puppy squeaked in reply, paw twitching toward her. The room fell silent. Even the machines seemed to hold their breath as mother and baby finally reunited through the glass. Two souls, broken but not defeated, finding their way back to each other. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, life began to bloom again inside the small clinic. The mother dog, once frail and broken, now rested comfortably in a clean, soft bed. Her wounds were healing, her fur beginning to regain its shine. But it was her eyes, once dim and lifeless, that now gleamed with warmth whenever her tiny pup was near. The puppy, though still small enough to fit in a single hand, had grown stronger each day. His once weak heartbeat now thudded with steady rhythm. Every morning, Ethan would come early just to see them, the mother gently licking her baby, and the little one pressing against her chest, searching for warmth and safety. Dr. Harris watched them from his office window, quietly amazed. "I've treated thousands of animals," he told Ethan one morning, "but I've never seen a bond so powerful. They're healing each other." Ethan smiled, kneeling beside them. Their family. They were never supposed to be apart. Sometimes the mother would glance up at Ethan, her eyes soft as if she understood. She allowed him to approach, even to hold her pup, something she wouldn't let anyone else do. That trust spoke louder than words. Under the vet's care and Ethan's devotion, both mother and baby began to thrive. The puppy's fur thickened, his tiny legs steadier each day. He'd stumble clumsily across the table, yipping proudly at every step, earning laughter from the whole staff. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan looked at them both and whispered, "You did it." "You beat the odds," Dr. Harris, standing nearby, nodded. "No," he said softly. "They did it, together." And for the first time in a long while, everyone in that small clinic felt something rare, pure, unfiltered hope. Dr. Harris had seen hundreds of recoveries during his long career, but none had ever moved him the way this one did. Every day he came to the clinic early, pretending it was to check vitals, but really it was to watch the miracle unfold. The once dying puppy now stumbled playfully around his mother, his tiny tail wagging like a spark of light. The mother, once broken and afraid, now looked stronger, her eyes full of a peace he hadn't seen in years. One morning, as he watched them together, something inside him cracked open. The puppy let out a soft bark, and the mother responded with a gentle nudge, curling her body protectively around him. The simple sight brought tears to his eyes. He turned away quickly, but Ethan saw it. "You okay, Doc?" Ethan asked softly. Dr. Harris nodded, wiping at his eyes. I thought I'd stopped feeling things like this," he said, his voice trembling. "You spend so long fixing bodies, you forget you're supposed to heal hearts too." He walked over to the incubator where the puppy had once lain, now empty, and smiled faintly. "When that little one came in, I didn't think he'd survive an hour. But he didn't just live. He reminded me why I became a vet." Ethan placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't just save them, Doc. You saved a piece of yourself too." The vet looked down at the small family resting peacefully and whispered, "Maybe you're right." His eyes glistened as he added, "I spent years saving lives, but this one taught me what life really means." The clinic, once a place of sterile walls and sorrowful endings, now felt alive. And for the first time in a long while, Dr. Harris allowed himself to believe that miracles weren't rare at all. Sometimes they just came in the smallest of packages. Weeks later, the story of the smallest puppy ever seen spread far beyond the walls of that little clinic. People from across town came just to glimpse the miracle that had defied every odd. The tiny pup, once discarded like trash, now trotted proudly beside his mother, his steps clumsy but full of life. The clinic staff began calling him Whisk, short for Whisper, because that's how his life had begun, with a faint cry in the dark that no one else had heard. Ethan visited every day, always bringing a new toy or blanket. The mother dog would greet him with a wag of her tail, and Whisk would stumble over to lick his fingers. Every time, Ethan would smile and whisper, "You made it, little fighter." Dr. Harris often stood at the doorway watching them, his heart full. What had started as a desperate night had become a story of hope, one that reminded everyone that compassion could turn even the smallest spark into a flame of life. Before Ethan left one evening, the vet handed him a small card, Whisk's adoption papers. "He belongs with you," Dr. Harris said softly. Ethan knelt beside the pup, tears glistening in his eyes. "You hear that, buddy? You're coming home." Whisk let out a cheerful yip, and even the mother seemed to smile. As the sun set outside the clinic, golden light spilling across the floor, Ethan looked back one last time. "You changed everything," he whispered, not just to Whisk, but to everyone who had witnessed the miracle. And as the door closed, Dr. Harris murmured to himself, "Sometimes the smallest lives leave the biggest footprints."